All right, so welcome to discussion 8. So in this today's discussion, so all of this discussion material is already on the website. So there's two things that you need to do for today. So uh, first is the instructions for today's discussion, and linked on the website is also the starter code for today's discussion. So in today's discussion, we are going to be bringing data persistence to our Stickies app that we did in discussion 6. So if you recall from discussion 6, our Stickies app looks something like this. So we have a plus button in the upper right corner. When we press on it, we have a new sticky note. And on the sticky notes, I can type something. So I could say, hello world, right? And I can move the sticky around to place it somewhere else. I can create additional stickies. I can overlay a sticky on top of another sticky, and I can click on a sticky to bring it up to the foreground. But the problem is that when I quit the app, so by swiping up, and oops, sorry, this is the other version. Where's my other version? Okay, so now when I quit the app, nothing is there. All right, you can see that nothing is there, right? And the issue is because we did not implement any data persistence. So everything was stored as the at state variable. And when the app quitted, everything in memory was just deallocated and it's gone anymore. So now we're back to a fresh start. So in today's discussion, we are going to be doing something like this. So we have our same UI. Okay, so now we create a sticky note. We can add a text to that sticky. So I'm going to say hello world again here. I'm going to create another sticky and I'm going to say bye world. And then I'll overlay these two just like that in that configuration. So now when I quit the app and if I relaunch the app, they're both there in the same positions with the same text with the same correct ordering. And if I delete one, and now let's move this all the way to the bottom right corner. Let's do the same thing. Let's quit the app, relaunch it. It's where we left off. Okay, so that is data persistence. So, all right, so the starter code that you have now be presented was the exact same code that we left off 2 weeks ago on discussion 8 at 6. So just to recap where everything is, or what we're working with again. So here we have in our content view, we have our main UI kind of logic to display all the stickies. So we have a view model, right? And in that view model, we have an array of stickies. And on this view model, we have some public methods called create sticky, remove sticky, and change sticky z index. And if you recall, the z index is basically the ordering to where we determined if a sticky should be layered on top of the others. And from from discussion 6, we have this logic where we're setting that z index to be the most recent time as a numerical value. So the higher the z index, the more forward it is to you. So the more on top it is in relative to the other stickies, right? So in our content view here, we're just basically, again, we're just going through our stickies and our view models. We're creating them. We have a add sticky, this is our add sticky button in the top right, trailing in our navigation toolbar. And then here this is what a sticky is, right? It has text as a position. And then we experimented with gestures. So we have a drag gesture. We have a long press gesture to do that animation, that expanding animation. And we have the delete button where we can delete sticky. So it's really a simple kind of view in itself. Okay. So go ahead. So what the format for today's discussion is that you'll be trying to follow these steps, and then I'll reconvene to implement step one, and then I'll let you guys do 5 minutes on step two, and then we'll reconvene and so forth around like something like that. Okay. So again, this should be on the website, and it should guide you to how we can convert an existing project into a SwiftData project with data persistence. Okay. Any questions? Are you guys able to access the links and everything? Good. Cool. All right. So, like I mentioned, we're going to be tracking these three different properties for a sticky. We're going to be tracking the position of a sticky. We are going to be tracking the text of the sticky, and we're going to be tracking and saving the Z index of a sticky. So these are the three properties that you will need to manage somehow for a sticky. And yeah, so these, if you remember from lectures on Tuesday, this should be some helpful tips and things like that on how you would to convert an existing project into data persistence with SwiftData. So if these terms are not familiar with you, I recommend to look at the lecture slides. I also have links or documentation throughout. So if you don't remember, that's totally fine. You could just click on these links and you can see what what I'm trying to get you to do. Okay. Cool. So without further ado, let's just focus on step one, all right, which is configuring our model and model container. So there's two kind of sub steps in this step. The first is to make our model compatible with SwiftData. And when I refer to model, what am I referring to? What is the model? So when you see the model in the Notion, what am I referring to in the code base? What is that? Does anyone remember NVVM, model view? So what is the model in our current MVVM state, our architecture? What does that represent? What is the model? So our model is our sticky, right? This is a how we represent a sticky note. So the model is simply a data representation of what the object that we're trying to represent in code is. And it's usually a struct or it's usually a class. And so this is our model. Our view model is our stickies view model. And the view part of the NVVM is simply our content view and our sticky view, right? So the view model is sort of where we create and contain our instances of our models and provides interfaces between our views and our model instances via these public methods. Okay, so why don't you guys take a couple of minutes to complete step one? Again, it should be relatively straightforward. There should be each one of these sub steps is one line of code. Okay, so there's no trick questions here. It's pretty straightforward. All right, so we're gonna reconvene in around 3 minutes or so, or a couple more minutes. Okay, and if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. All right, and again, I really recommend you guys to talk amongst yourselves to kind of figure these things out. Right. Right. So for those who are coming in, we have discussion material on websites. So there is a Notion with the instructions for today and also the starter code for today in GitHub Classroom. And what we're working on is that we're implementing data persistence to our sticky notes app that we've done in discussion 6 with SwiftData. All right, how are we doing on step 1? Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. How are we doing? Yes, no, yes. Okay. Do you want some extra time or do you want me to uh implement it? What do you guys want? More time? Implements? Okay. Well, I guess we'll implement. Okay. So, the first step is to make our model compatible with SwiftData. So we're going to go into our code, and this is referring to our model, right? So right now, SwiftData won't work automatically because our model, which is our sticky class, it's SwiftData doesn't know about it, and we need to make the sticky class be able to be saved, okay, or be able to work with SwiftData. And the thing that we do with it is we simply use this at model macro. Now, Xcode is gonna yell at you and say, I don't know what the heck at model is. And that's because we need to import Swift data. So import Swift data, just like so. Okay. So now we can see that we are making this class be able to work with Swift data. And we have this kind of warning. We'll just follow it. We'll just make the ID a var instead of a let. And you can see that warning goes away. Now, you might have noticed that I removed the at observable. And we really don't need that in this case because when we're saving, so every single time the user moves or does something or changes a property of a sticky, we'll immediately save it. And it will automatically update appropriately, as we'll see in a later bit. Okay. So that's sub step 1. All right. The first thing you do is that on a model, you need to add the at model macro. Now, the second step is we need to create the model container. And if you recall, a model container is simply the database or the underlying file stored on your physical iPhone that Swift Data manages for your particular app. Okay, so it's that underlying store that Swift Data needs to have to make your app work with Swift Data. Okay, so what you need to do is that you need to go into your app, not your view, not any particular view. It's usually your root entry point into your application. And this is our root entry point. So again, it looks a bit different from a regular view, and this is because this is the entry point into your application. So when I run the simulator, this is the first thing that gets basically ran. So it's going to go to your content view at the very beginning. So what we want to do is that we want to create our model container right here. And this is because we want all of our subviews of content view to be able to have access to this model container. So we need to put this model container view modifier on the very top, the highest level in our view hierarchy, so that all of its subviews can have access, right? And so what we do is that we use this model. First thing we do is before that we do import Swift data, and we will do dot model container. And we're going to use the one with the for parameter. And this is where we basically specify what types do we want to work or what types do we want our app to be supported. So this model container, which is again an underlying file that Swift Data needs to manage for your app, what types does it support? We only have one model, which is our sticky. So we're going to say we just want to support our sticky type. So to do that, we do sticky.self. And if we recall, sticky.self says the type. So what we're saying is that we're going to create a model container that supports the sticky type. Okay. So now we could save instances of stickies. So we could save sticky objects into SwiftData. So that is step one. Any questions so far? Does this make sense? Good. Awesome. So again, when you're converting an app, your regular app you have so far to SwiftData, there's a lot of procedural things, step-by-step things that you need to do. And this is one of the first two steps that you need to do. Awesome. So let's go to our step two. And step two is updating our sticky model. So right now, if you take a look at our sticky object, we have basically two properties. We have a ID property, which is a unique uniform ID. And we also have a z-index, which is specifying how that particular sticky is layered in relation to the other stickies, right? But we also, again, from the specs, we want to save the position, we want to save the text of that particular sticky in addition to the z-index. So the z-index we already have, right? But we need to encode or save these two additional properties. So you will need to add something or mutate stickies to support that logic. Now, if you note in the step two, SwiftData does not support CG size. So what I mean by that is if you go to content view and see how we represent a position of a sticky, it's represented as a CG size, right? But SwiftData out of the box does not support that. So you need to do something to add some, I don't know, mutate the sticky model to encode a CG size in some way. So I really recommend that you look into what is a CG size and what comprises a CG size and add those additional properties into here. All right. So this should take around 2 minutes or so. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. All right. So I've accomplished this in 3 lines of code. Uh, so what 3 lines of code that you need to do to support encoding position and also text? All right. All right. Can someone tell me what first thing that they did? Let's start with text first. So I want to save the text. So how do I save it to a like? How do I encode that text into a sticky? How do I do that? Yes. There we go. So we just do var text, and that's a string. I'll initialize it to empty string, just like that. Okay. Now, the tricky part, does anyone figure out a way to encode a CG size into a sticky without using CG size explicitly? Okay. Uh, so if we look at a CG size, right, I could do option click to see what a CG size is. And you can see that a CG size is a structure that contains a width and height value. So I can click on this documentation and I could see what a CG size is. So a CG size has a width and a height, which are both doubles. So we have seen that we're able to encode doubles for SwiftData. So now with that information, how do I encode a CG size into here? So CG size has a width and height. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm just gonna add a width and a height. So I'm gonna have two new properties called position width, which are doubles. And I will do the exact same thing for the height. And this is all you need. Okay. Now, this working again, you're going to be working with CG size in the view. So I like to create helper methods. I really like helper methods. So I'm going to create a helper method called get position CG size, and that returns a CG size. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return a CG size instance with the position width and the position height, just like that. So it's a really uh, a helper method for us to work with the position width and position height, not explicitly, so we can abstract. We don't need to worry about that, and we'll just, in our views, we'll just interact with it via this function. All right, so that's basically it. So, any questions there? Does it make sense? Cool. All right, so the next step is to configure a sticky views initializer. Now, this is the first time we've seen that we need to do something like this. So when we create a sticky, right, we want to set the appropriate at state variables like text and position. So what I mean by that, so here in a sticky view, we have these properties, right? We have the text of the sticky, we have the position of the stickies. And now these at state variables is how it is, that's what's shown on the view itself, right? The sticky view itself. That's where the actual sticky position is. Now, when we relaunch the app or quit and relaunch the app, all of these are going to be reset back to these default values, right? What we want is that we want to set these values to, we want to set these values via with the values, the corresponding values in our sticky that we passed in. Okay, so we have the sticky here, and we want to set these values or set the text and position to be exact based on the respective values in sticky. So we want to set this text to be sticky's text, right? The text property in sticky. We want to set the position, this position to the with the value of the position, the CG size in their or sticky variable, right? So that's what we want to do. And to do that, we need to do it within this sticky views initializer. So sticky view, even though this is a SwiftUI view, it's a struct, and structs can have initializers. So what I recommend you to do is to try to figure this out. Again, the syntax is a bit alien. It's a bit weird, but I recommend you to go to this uh, Stack Overflow thread and see what you could do with this to implement what we're trying to do, right? So any questions there? Does this make sense? Okay. So I'll give you guys a couple more minutes to try to figure this out. Right. Again, this should be very, very similar to what we are seeing in sticky views. So yeah. Okay. All right, how we doing? Are you doing okay? Kind of, no. How are you feeling? You want more time on this, or should we move on? All right, so let's move on. Uh, what we want to do is that we're going to do is very similar to what we've seen in the Stack Overflow. So what we're going to do is that we're going to inner initializer. We will need to pass in, so again, when we create a new sticky view, the first thing that is being called is initializer. So we need to have a parameter that we can, when we call sticky view, we'll pass in our sticky. So we'll do that. And then we're basically setting our property here to the one that we passed in via our initializer. Cool. And now, as you've seen in the Stack Overflow, we have this really weird syntax. So what we're doing is that we're going to create a new state with initial value. So a at state has a initial value, which is sort of like a wrapped value, like an optional kind of thing that it manages. And what we want to do is that this will be for the sticky text. Okay, so I want to set the sticky text to this at state, right, as an at state variable. And so what I need to do is that I can't do this, okay? Um, because it's going to yell at me and says I cannot assign value of type state string to type string. So this is an at state, which is sort of like well, you think of it analogous to an optional with a wrapped value, and a wrapped value is our sticky text. So this text is simply a string, but we want the at state version of it. And so to do that, we do this underscore text. And so when I option click on this, you can see that well, this is the at state version. Okay. So this is what we're doing is that we're assigning this at state, like new at state to the to this. If we just did this by itself, this is a string, not an at state. So that's what we're doing. Okay. And so we're doing the same thing for our position. And now because I have written that helper method, what I could do is I could just do sticky dot get position CG size. And this, gives me a CG size based on sticky dot position width and sticky dot position height. And I'm creating a new state variable and I'm assigning that to this. All right. So that's the kind of quirk that we need to do. So if you ever uh need to set your at state variables based on some argument, this is how you would do it. All right. Cool. Any questions there? Good. Cool. All right. So now let's go to step 4. This is our last step, and it's our most involved step. So Swift data doesn't really work with our NVVM architectural paradigm. And one of the main reasons is because we want to interact with the underlying Swift data store. To do that, we need to access it via model context that Dylan mentioned in lecture on Tuesday. So we don't interact with the model container explicitly. We interact with it via a model context. How do we get the model context? We get it through the environment, just like that, as a variable. So a model context has several methods that we can call, most notably insert, delete, and save. So if we create new instances, for example, we create new stickies, to insert it into SwiftData, we use the insert method. To delete an already existing saved sticky, we use delete. And to make sure that our changes are persisted, we use the save method. So it looks something like this. So let's say we have some existing saved sandwich that we've got from SwiftData. Here we create a new sandwich. Here we are inserting this new sandwich into SwiftData via the model context. Here we are trying to delete the existing saved sandwich via the model context. Now, when you call these methods, they don't do it right away. You need to do model context.save in order to actually implement or follow through these methods. And the reason for this is because when we're writing or accessing to disk, it is a very time-consuming procedure. So if you have taken 61C, you probably know what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is that when your app touches the disk, so your SSD or files save on disk, it is like, you're taking a flight, okay? But when we're working with, for example, when we're creating a sandwich, we're working within our RAM. So that is like sort of like, you're driving around Berkeley. That's sort of how fast it is, okay? So we want to minimize our disk accesses. So what it's doing is that this is all in memory, right? The model context is a memory representation of what we have on disk. We're inserting, we're deleting stuff, we're modifying that memory representation. And when we call save, that's when SwiftData actually modifies what we have saved physically in disk. Okay. On an iPhone, it's your SSD, but the same thing. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of what's happening. But if you don't understand that, that's totally fine. If you're interested in that, take 61C. So remember to call model context.save. And if you remember, this is a throwable method. So it can throw an error. And so we need to use the try keyword. And this also might return uh, an optional. So we need to have this $sign, but don't worry about it. Just follow the syntax and you should be good to go. Right. Now, in addition, so no, we're not using our view model anymore. We're going to delete our view model. So you might be asking, okay, where we're getting all of our stickies? And that's where the @query macro is coming in. So the @query macro is how we can actually query our saved stickies from SwiftData. So, and what's really cool about that is that when the SwiftData underlying store changes, for example, if you saved something to SwiftData or if you deleted something from SwiftData, the @query macro will automatically refetch the updated entries and re-render your SwiftUI views to match what you have in the SwiftData, if that makes sense. Okay, so if I add something to SwiftData, the @query macro will trigger, and it will trigger a re-render of our view. So ensuring that our view is up or in sync with the data in SwiftData. So due to time's sake, you can just follow along with me for this. Okay. All right. So again, there's a lot of things that we want to do. One of them is we're going to say bye-bye to our view model. We don't want it anymore, but we still need to keep our sticky, right? That's what we want to keep still, our model. But all of this view model, that's going to go bye-bye. So we're just going to go to delete, and then we're going to go move to trash. And then here we're going to create a new file and with our sticky. Now we're gonna have some errors because we need to import the relevant libraries or frameworks. So one of them is identifiable. Um, Actually, these are all okay. So one of them is, of course, SwiftData. So we're gonna just do SwiftData. That's for our @model macro. And the other ones, for example, like UID and CG size, that is part of what's called foundation. So Foundation is simply a library that contains all of Swift's most primitive data types. So for example, the UID, the CG size, the other core graphics things, and other kind of low-level data types. And Swift UI, if you ever wondered why you don't see this with Swift UI, right? Or for example, in our view, right? Where is Foundation? Swift UI, that library already contains Foundation, so you don't need to explicitly import it again. All right, so here we have our content view now. Now we have removed our Stickies view model, so I'm going to delete our @state Stickies view model. We're going to delete our environment. We don't need that anymore. And our first task here is that where do we get our stickies? So before we were saving all of our stickies in our view model, but now we want to get them from SwiftData. And the way to do this is using the @query macro. And then this is a variable. So I'm going to specify I want to query all of my stickies, which is an array of stickies, just like that. Now, the @query macro is much more powerful than this. You could actually have, you could also, you could have like, you could sort things, you could filter things on this @query macro. We're not going to get into that, but that's something you could take a look into when you're doing your final project if you need to use that implementation. It's yelling at me because I haven't imported SwiftData, so I'm going to import SwiftData. And then now I could just replace the viewModel.stickies with my stickies. And again, just to reiterate, this is pulling from SwiftData all of the stickies I have in my SwiftData. And if I edit the SwiftData store, or if I insert something or if I delete something, it's going to trigger a re-render of the content views body. So I'm always up to sync with what I have in my SwiftData store. Cool. All right, so now we have our create sticky. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to actually create the sticky new instance right within our with animation closure. So what we're going to do is that we are going to create a new sticky instance. So let new sticky equals sticky, and we have our z index with again, this is the exact same thing what we had in our view model. So we created a new sticky right here. And now I need to insert it into SwiftData. The first task is, remember, when you want to interact with this underlying SwiftData store, you have to do that via the model context. So how do I get my model context here? I get it via the environments. So in the environments, I access via the key path. So what is the key path? Which is model context. I get it as a variable. And now I can interact with the underlying SwiftData store via the model context now. So what I'm trying to do is, again, I'm creating a new sticky. I need to insert it into the model context. Now, it hasn't written to the disk yet, right? It hasn't been saved yet. So what I need to do is I need to call model context.save, and I will need to add this try keyword to make this happen. Okay. So now when this code, this model context.save gets actually ran, now we're basically whatever changes that's being tracked in our model context, that's actually being saved to the physical file, or how SwiftData is managing all of our saved instances on disk. Okay. So you remember whenever changing something, you need to have this model context to save. Otherwise, you might be wondering what went wrong. Why is it not working as I expected? Any questions so far here? Does this make sense? This is pretty good. Okay. All right. So the next thing to do is that, okay, we'll delete this environment. We don't need that anymore. We need to save our positions, right? This is where, when we drag the sticky and when we lift our hand or finger, the dot ended closure is when it gets triggered when I lift my finger off the screen, right? And here we're basically having the new position width, and here we're having the new position height values of our position. So what we need to do is that basically we want to save this to our sticky instance that we have in our sticky view. So to do this, we basically do sticky dot position width equals our position width that we have newly calculated here, and we'll have our position height that we have calculated here. So now we updated our sticky's position values, and now we need to save it to SwiftData. And to this, we simply do model context dot save like that. Now we don't have model context here, so we basically get it via the environment. So we do environment, model context, var model context. So now when I'm moving a sticky note, I'm lifting it away. It's going to calculate the new position, and I'm saving it to that particular sticky, and it's going to save it. All right, so now let's scroll down. So we have our change sticky z index logic here. And what we're going to do here is that, again, we're going to basically copy what we had before, and we're going to do sticky dot z index equals date dot time interval since reference date, and we're going to do model context dot save on that. All right, let's keep scrolling down. We have our remove sticky. And again, this is the sort of the same. No, it's not the same logic. We're just basically, so here we have in our sticky view, we have our sticky, right, being passed in. And we're saying we want to delete that sticky. So we're basically do model context dot delete sticky, and then we're going to save it. And the final thing is that we need to manage our text. So where is the logic for our text? That is right here. This is our text field, right? And we have a @state variable that's keeping track of the text that's being put in the text field. And what we want to do is that when this text changes, we want to save it to SwiftData. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to use something called the onChange view modifier. And when this value changes, we'll trigger this closure. So we're gonna observe the text variable, and we get our old value back and our new value back. And of course, we want our new value, so we want to save it to sticky's text to the new value. Sorry, we're saving the new value to the sticky.text. And then, of course, we got to save it to our model context. So that's it. So when I try to rerun this now, uh, you can see that when, okay, so I could create a new sticky note. I could say hi, hello. I create another sticky note here. Put it there. I double click, bye-bye. And then here, they're both there. Okay, so that's how you implement data persistence with SwiftData. All right, so we're out of time. So we'll